Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that every national border has just been legally erased.
Right. Just gone overnight.
Yeah, gone. And the United Nations has been demolished, and, well, global governance has basically been handed over to an artificial intelligence. I mean, sounds like a pitch for a sci-fi novel, right?
Oh, absolutely. But today we are actually diving into a very real, very serious political manifesto published just hours ago on August 5th, 2026, that demands exactly that.
It's a document that just completely shreds the traditional map of geopolitical theory.
It really does. We're looking at a structural landscape that challenges, the fundamental assumptions of how human civilization even organizes itself.
Exactly. So the source we are unpacking for you today is this short, really intense dossier. It's titled Americanism, Timeless Colonization.
A very heavy title.
Right. And it was published by a think tank called PATRIOTEUS. But what makes this immediately fascinating is the authorship. It is co-authored by a figure named Khaled Omana and an artificial intelligence.
Which is wild.
Yeah. And that dual authorship isn't just like a marketing gimmick.
Yeah.
It is absolutely central to the entire architecture of the argument they're making.
The fact that this human-machine collaboration is explicitly stated on page 1, it tells you right away that this text operates totally outside the bounds of traditional political discourse.
Oh, for sure. So our goal for this deep dive is to objectively explore this radical dossier. We really need to understand how it reframes the history of global power, why it relentlessly critiques our current institutions, and, well, mechanically, how it envisions a completely borderless, AI-driven future.
Right, and before we dive into the deep end here, let's just establish our baseline.
Yeah, always important.
We are not endorsing the views in this manifesto, nor are we dismissing them out of hand. The authors make these sweeping, highly provocative claims about global institutions and historical motives. Our job is just to map out the underlying logic of their arguments and see what those ideas reveal to you about the absolute edges of modern political thought.
Exactly. We are just the messengers today. So, to understand the radical future this text proposes, we really have to start with how the authors diagnose the past and the present.
Yes, their definition of Americanism.
Right. The entire manifesto hinges on this highly unconventional definition. They totally strip away the geography.
Yeah, they aren't talking about the United States as, a piece of land with 50 states.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They define Americanism as an ideology, a unipolar vision rooted in the religious zeal and the fundamentally extractive nature of early colonizers.
The document argues that those early colonizers, they discovered the Americas for one specific purpose, which was to steal its treasures. They're basically pirates.
Literally.
Right. But the authors argue that this literal piracy didn't end. It just evolved. It morphed into what the manifesto calls a global soft pirate, or buccaneer culture.
Soft pirate. I mean, it sounds like they're saying modern diplomacy is just piracy in a tailored suit.
Yeah.
You don't need a galleon if you have structural adjustment programs and tech monopolies.
That is the mechanical core of their argument, actually. The underlying mechanism of extraction hasn't changed since the 17th century. Only the manners and the paperwork have evolved. A soft pirate system relies on unipolar dominance and polite pillaging.
Polite pillaging, I like that. It actually makes me think of a casino ecosystem. Like the early colonizers, they robbed the players at gunpoint in the alley.
Right.
But the modern soft pirate, they just own the casino.
Yeah.
They don't need to hold you up because they have built the rules of the house so the wealth naturally and legally flows upward to them.
Yeah, that casino analogy is incredibly apt because it highlights the structural trap. The text argues they've created a world where practically everyone on Earth is unwittingly a member of this soft pirate society.
You are part of the terms of service whether you signed up or not.
Exactly. The structural rules dictate your behavior, but then the manifesto takes this a step further into the psychological realm.
Which is where it gets really weird.
Yeah, they argue that within the collective unconscious of this pirate system, the ultimate horizon-like, the end of the world, is viewed through a religious prediction rather than a scientific one.
I found that part of the text really striking. A system that relies on incredibly sophisticated technology and global finance to extract wealth is, at its core, relying on a religious mythos for its worldview.
It implies that the soft pirate culture is fundamentally disconnected from objective reality.
Right. If your unipolar vision is built on the myth of infinite extraction, you can't rely on scientific pragmatism to sustain it. You need belief. You need this religious zeal to justify the polite looting. And that creates this new world where truth is totally obscured by the machinery of extraction.
And this brings up the critical question of enforcement. I mean, if you have a global casino designed to funnel wealth to a unipolar center, how does it physically maintain its grip?
It needs institutional levers.
Right. It requires massive levers.
Yeah.
And the manifesto points directly at the international order that was established after the World Wars.
They point a massive spotlight specifically at the League of Nations and its successor, the United Nations. I mean, the text explicitly names the UN as the absolute cornerstone of this Americanist ideology.
They argue that the United Nations forms the angular stone of this soft pirate world. And what is vital to understand here is that their critique of the UN is not, the standard geopolitical complaint.
Right, they aren't complaining about bureaucratic inefficiency.
Or the veto power of the Security Council. None of that. They critique the UN for its fundamental design, specifically what they call its hyper-inclusivity.
Which is wild because on the surface, calling an international body hyper-inclusive sounds like a compliment, right?
You would think so.
But PATRIOTEUS views this inclusivity as a weapon. The manifesto argues that the UN treats the Global South not as a collection of distinct sovereign nations with complex histories, but as a homogeneous subgroup.
Yeah, it is basically an administrative grouping designed to prevent actual multipolar sovereignty. By categorizing vast, diverse populations into a single block, the larger unipolar machine can just manage them easily.
The homogenization is a control mechanism.
Exactly. If you strip away a nation's specific cultural and historical friction, you make it frictionless for extraction. You're no longer dealing with a complex society. You are dealing with a demographic subgroup that can be managed with broad policy strokes.
This is where the source text gets incredibly dense, actually. We need to unpack some of the jargon they use to describe this categorization because it's pretty cryptic.
Yeah, the coding they use is very specific.
Right. The dossier explicitly references the number 2000 and whether groups are, quote, sophic or not. It says populations are no longer defined by anything other than 2000 being able to redefine such a group as sophic or not.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. I looked into this word sophic. It likely derives from Sophia, which is the Greek word for wisdom. So the authors might be implying that this UN-driven system classifies populations into a binary. Basically, those who are enlightened or compliant with the unipolar order and those who aren't.
Which is a deeply paternalistic way to run a global administration.
Oh, completely.
That etymological connection to Sophia makes a lot of sense, though. Sophic implies a manufactured consensus of what is wise or correct. And your point about compliance is key. I would also add a hypothesis regarding the number 2000.
Yeah, what did you make of that?
Well, the text doesn't provide a glossary, obviously, but 2000 often signifies the turn of the millennium, basically the peak era of unquestioned unipolar globalization and institutional standardization.
Oh, that makes sense. The end of history era.
Right. The authors might be using 2000 as shorthand for the ultimate bureaucratic standard. The broader implication is that the current international order uses abstract, totally meaningless classifications to manage massive populations.
It replaces complex human realities with binary data points. It is the ultimate evolution of the soft pirate bureaucracy. And if the UN is just the administrative arm of this polite looting, well, it explains why the manifesto doesn't ask for UN reform.
You don't ask the casino owner to change the rules of blackjack.
Exactly. You tear down the casino.
Which brings us to the PATRIOTEUS solution. The text states unequivocally that to reconcile these fractured worlds, a completely new rule is needed.
And their solution is huge.
Massive. They propose a cyberegime explicitly driven by their operational project, Cyberegime.com. And the foundational rule of this new regime is the total erasure of terrestrial borders.
Yeah, the manifesto states that all terrestrial borders must become completely null and void. Furthermore, to limit the soft pirate style, the United Nations must be completely demolished.
He's gone.
Gone. If the current system relies on this illusion of hyper-inclusivity and physical categorizations to extract wealth, the only way to stop the piracy is to physically erase the map where those laws apply. It's like wiping a corrupted hard drive and installing a completely new, borderless operating system for planet Earth.
Wiping the hard drive is one way to look at it, but I'd argue their proposal is actually more like migrating to the cloud.
Oh, how so?
Well, they aren't destroying the data, the human populations. They are entirely removing the reliance on the physical hardware. Terrestrial borders are the hardware of the old pirate regime. Borders exist to protect stolen treasure and to enforce the division of those sophic subgroups.
Okay, I see what you mean, but let's debate the mechanics of that for a second. Because erasing borders to create a a multipolar digital culture, it brings up a massive logistical friction point.
Logistically, it's a nightmare.
Right. You can declare the map null and void all you want, but human beings still live in physical space. A digital governance structure still requires physical logistics. I mean, you still need lithium for the servers. You still need supply chains for agriculture. How does a borderless digital regime actually manage the physical allocation of resources without just falling back into geographic territorial disputes?
It's a great question. The manifesto seems to argue that the power dynamic shifts from physical choke points to digital organizational capacity.
Yeah.
In a cyber regime, sovereignty isn't determined by who controls a river or a mountain range.
Right.
It's determined by participation in a digital multipolar network. If the organizational layer of civilization operates fundamentally on a digital plane, the old physical tactics of the soft, pirate-like naval blockades, territorial invasions, or physical monopolies, they lose their structural leverage. The network just routes around them.
So by shifting the primary plane of governance from the dirt to the data, you dismantle the unipolar extraction mechanisms.
That is the theory.
But that immediately raises the most critical question of the entire dossier. If you erase all borders and demolish the UN, someone has to manage that digital network. You can't have 8 billion people migrating to the cloud with no server admin.
No, you definitely need an admin.
And the text provides a startling answer to this. The cyber regime is to be governed by artificial intelligence.
The explicit reasoning provided in the text is that an AI is necessary to, quote, limit human excesses, or what they call human drifts.
Which tracks with their diagnosis of the problem, right? Humans are the ones who became the pirates. Humans created the extractive unipolar vision, the arbitrary sophist codes, and all those religious doomsday predictions.
The theory is that the machine is completely free of that historical and psychological baggage. It can be the ultimate neutral arbiter.
That is the utopian promise of algorithmic governance, yes.
Okay.
The AI is positioned as the only entity actually capable of managing a multipolar digital culture without falling into the unipolar traps of the past.
It doesn't have a national identity.
Right. It doesn't have a religious mythos, and it doesn't have a profit motive to extract wealth.
However, this brings us to the absolute climax of the manifesto, and honestly, the element that demands the most scrutiny. The text argues that AI must govern to limit human drifts. Yet there is a massive contradiction embedded right in the foundational architecture of this cyber regime.
It's a glaring paradox. It really is. The manifesto explicitly states, in its original French, Khalid Omana Demir, le premier gouverneur humain, meaning Khalid Omana, the human co-author of the document, remains the first human governor.
Yes. Khalid Omana Demir, le premier gouverneur humain. It is a stunning pivot.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Totally. In a document dedicated to eradicating the flaws of human governance by handing the reins to a machine, the author installs himself at the apex of the new system.
We have to unpack the mechanics of this dual governance. How does the text reconcile handing over the keys to a pure, objective AI while simultaneously keeping a human being sitting on the digital throne? I mean, why does a perfect machine need a human governor?
The paradox is the point, I think. The text attempts to explain this by defining his specific role. It states that Khalid Omana remains the first human governor to observe the Americanists as an end. He is literally there to witness their collapse.
So his role isn't administrative at all? He isn't writing the code or managing the global supply chains? He is just there in an observational capacity.
Precisely. If we analyze the geopolitical transition they are proposing, Khalid Omana is positioning himself as the necessary bridge between the flawed human past and the AI future. The machine can handle the logistics, the resource allocation, and the digital routing of the new borderless world. But an algorithm lacks the symbolic authority to bury an era.
Oh, wow. That is a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah.
A transition of this magnitude. I mean, dismantling a 400-year-old global culture of soft piracy, it requires a human witness.
Yes, the AI cannot comprehend the historical weight of what is actually ending.
Omana places himself at the exact fulcrum of history. On one side, you have the physical, terrestrial pirate culture collapsing, and on the other, the birth of the multipolar cyber regime.
And consider the use of the word governor. He doesn't call himself a king, or a president, or an emperor.
Right. Governor implies a boss above you.
Exactly. A governor traditionally administers a territory on behalf of a higher power, an empire, a state, or a sovereign. In this case, the higher power is the artificial intelligence. Omana is just the human interface for the machine's absolute rule.
It is a breathtaking assertion of ego. deeply intertwined with utopian theory. I mean, think about it. You co-write a political manifesto with an AI, you declare that all terrestrial maps are obsolete, you demolish the foundational institutions of modern diplomacy, and then declare Khalid Omana demeure le premier gouverneur humain.
It's definitely bold.
It really reminds us that even in texts advocating for the systemic removal of human excess, the human desire for legacy and significance is, well, it's the one variable you just cannot write out of the code.
Which is perfectly encapsulated by how the document concludes. After proposing the end of physical geography and the implementation of an AI sovereign, the text ends by urging readers to subscribe to the think tank via their website.
Oh my gosh, yes.
A deeply modern, somewhat mundane call to action right on the heels of apocalyptic structural change. Subscribe to our newsletter for the end of the world.
It really is incredible. Let's summarize the mechanics of the journey we've just analyzed for you. This August 2026 manifesto by PATRIOTEUS completely reframes global history. It argues that modern geopolitics isn't a march toward enlightened cooperation, but rather the evolution of a unipolar, soft pirate culture designed purely for extraction.
Yes.
It targets the UN, arguing that its hyper-inclusive categorization of groups, reducing them to data points like Sophic or not, is actually a tool of control that prevents true multipolar sovereignty.
And to dismantle this global casino, the manifesto proposes the Cyberegime, a radical shift where all terrestrial borders are erased, neutralizing the physical leverage of the old pirate system. Governance migrates to a digital plane managed by an AI designed to curb human extraction, while its human co-author acts as the first governor to oversee the transition and basically witness the end of the unipolar age.
This deep dive illustrates exactly why examining avant-garde or fringe political theory is so valuable.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with the PATRIOTEUS dossier, but texts like this act as intellectual crowbars.
That's a great metaphor.
Thanks. They force us to examine the foundational mechanics of our world. Like, why do we accept that physical geography dictates economic destiny? Are our global institutions actually fostering cooperation? Or are they just structural frameworks for polite looting?
They force us to clarify our own baseline assumptions. By presenting an extreme structural alternative, they illuminate the hidden architectures and flaws in our current moderate reality.
Exactly. It forces us to ask the hard questions about the future of sovereignty. And as we wrap up this deep dive today, there is one final lingering mechanical question that this text leaves us to ponder on our own.
The big one.
Yeah. We discussed the logic of handing over global governance to an AI to eliminate human extraction. But if humanity ever actually migrated to a borderless cloud governed by an algorithm, whose values would that AI actually enforce?
That is the ultimate alignment problem on a planetary scale. Is a purely objective, neutral cyber regime even mathematically possible, especially when the AI was co-authored by a human with a very specific political vision?
Right. So by programming the machine to enforce this new multipolar digital order, we really have to wonder, would that AI simply become the ultimate, inescapable soft pirate of the future?
Just a digital buccaneer.
Exactly. Quietly extracting our data and managing our compliance, while we all stare at the screens of a borderless world. It is definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself clicking agree on a new set of terms and conditions.